Cody Rhodes just dropped a nuclear bomb on WWE's entire power structure by filing an official complaint against Nick Aldis to WWE headquarters, and if you think this is just standard wrestling drama or another work storyline designed to create tension between characters, you are completely missing what's really happening here, because this goes way deeper than anything we've seen play out on television. The American Nightmare, the man who came back to WWE to finish his story and become the undisputed WWE champion, the person who represents everything this company claims to value about hard work and perseverance in earning your spot, has gone over Nick Aldis's head to complain directly to Triple H and WWE's executive team about the SmackDown general manager's blatant favoritism and protection of the bloodline despite their constant violations of every rule and standard that's supposed to exist in this company. And before you start typing that Cody is just being a whiny champion who can't handle competition, before you dismiss this as Cody playing politics backstage, I need you to understand that what prompted this complaint is so egregious, so undeniable, so completely indefensible that even people who don't particularly like Cody Rhodes are admitting he has every right to be absolutely furious about how Nick Aldis has been managing SmackDown lately. This isn't about Cody wanting special treatment or wanting his enemies punished because they're threatening his position. This is about a WWE champion who's supposed to be the face of the brand watching his general manager actively support and enable a faction that's been terrorizing everyone on the roster including Cody himself, and finally saying enough is enough and demanding accountability from the people who run this company. Let me walk you through exactly what happened that pushed Cody Rhodes to the point where he felt he had no choice but to file an official complaint, because the sequence of events over the past month paints a picture of such obvious bias and such blatant disregard for basic fairness that it's genuinely shocking WWE allowed it to continue this long. 3 weeks ago, the Bloodline attacked Cody Rhodes after his match, a coordinated assault involving multiple members that left Cody injured and barely able to defend the championship he worked so hard to win. This wasn't a spontaneous attack born out of heat from a match. This was premeditated, orchestrated violence designed to take out the WWE champion, and it happened in front of Nick Aldis, who was at ringside for the conclusion of the match. Any competent general manager, any person with even a basic understanding of how authority is supposed to work in professional wrestling, would have immediately confronted the Bloodline, would have announced suspensions or fines or at minimum some kind of investigation into what happened. Instead, Nick Aldis walked backstage without saying a word, without taking any action, without even acknowledging that something completely unacceptable had just occurred on his watch. Cody, being the professional he is, didn't immediately run to social media or go public with his frustration. He went through proper channels. He approached Nick Aldis privately backstage at the next SmackDown, and he asked directly what consequences the Bloodline would face for their unprovoked attack on the WWE champion. According to sources who were present for this conversation, Aldis gave Cody some vague response about reviewing the footage and considering his options, basically bureaucratic nonsense designed to buy time and avoid making any actual decisions. Cody pressed him, asking specific questions about whether the Bloodline would be fined, suspended, or banned from ringside during his future matches, and Aldis apparently became defensive, telling Cody that he needed to let the general manager do his job without interference from wrestlers who think their championship status entitles them to special treatment. That response alone should have been a massive red flag that something was fundamentally broken in the relationship between SmackDown's top champion and its supposed authority figure. The following week, Cody had a championship defense scheduled against a legitimate contender, a match that should have been contested under normal rules with no outside interference. Everyone in the building and everyone watching at home knew that the Bloodline would probably try to get involved given their recent targeting of Cody, so the expectation was that Nick Aldis would either ban them from ringside or at least position security around the ring to prevent interference. Instead, Aldis did absolutely nothing. No special stipulations, no extra security, no warnings issued to the Bloodline about consequences if they interfered. Predictably, Roman Reigns and his family came down during the match, distracted Cody, caused chaos that allowed the challenger to nearly win the championship, and only through sheer determination and a bit of luck did Cody manage to retain his title. After the match, the Bloodline attacked Cody again, beating him down in the center of the ring while the crowd booed and chanted for someone to help, and once again Nick Aldis was nowhere to be found. This pattern continued for 2 more weeks with slight variations but the same basic result. The Bloodline would interfere in Cody's matches or attack him during segments. Nick Aldis would either ignore it completely or issue meaningless statements about monitoring the situation, and Cody was left to fend for himself against a group that outnumbered him and that apparently faced zero consequences for their repeated violations. The tipping point came on last week's SmackDown when Cody was scheduled to appear in a segment addressing his upcoming title defense, and the Bloodline interrupted him before he could speak. Roman Reigns got in Cody's face and threatened to take the championship whether Cody was ready or not. Solo Sikoa shoved Cody, and the Usos surrounded him in what was clearly the setup for another beatdown. Security finally rushed the ring to separate everyone, and as they were restoring order, Nick Aldis's music hit and everyone expected him to finally take decisive action. Aldis walked out to the stage with a microphone, and what he said next was so shocking, so completely biased, so utterly indefensible that the crowd in the arena and fans watching at home couldn't believe what they were hearing. Aldis announced that he'd been watching the escalating tension between Cody Rhodes and the Bloodline, and that he determined the best way to resolve this situation was to book Cody in a series of matches against various Bloodline members over the coming weeks, and if Cody lost any of those matches, he would be forced to defend his WWE Championship against Roman Reigns at the next Premium Live event. Let me repeat that so you understand how absolutely insane this decision is. Nick Aldis, the SmackDown general manager, responded to the Bloodline's repeated unprovoked attacks on the WWE champion by punishing the champion, by putting Cody's title defense opportunities at risk because of attacks that Cody didn't instigate and couldn't prevent. The crowd immediately turned on Aldis, booing so loudly that he couldn't finish his announcement. Cody stood in the ring looking genuinely stunned, not the work shock that wrestlers do when they're selling a storyline, but real confusion and anger about what was happening. Roman Reigns and the Bloodline on the other hand were celebrating, smirking, clearly satisfied that the general manager had just handed them exactly what they wanted despite their actions warranting punishment not reward. That moment crystallized everything that's been wrong with Nick Aldis's management of SmackDown, everything that wrestlers in the locker room have been complaining about for months, everything that Cody Rhodes has been dealing with since winning the championship. The general manager isn't a neutral arbiter enforcing rules fairly. He's actively supporting the Bloodline, actively making decisions that benefit them and harm their opponents, and he's doing it so blatantly that even casual fans can see the bias. That night after SmackDown went off the air, Cody Rhodes went directly to his tour bus, got on a phone call with his legal representation in WWE's Human Resources Department, and filed a formal complaint against Nick Aldis. The complaint, which has been leaked to several wrestling news outlets though WWE hasn't officially acknowledged it, alleges that Aldis has created a hostile work environment through his discriminatory treatment of Cody and his preferential treatment of the Bloodline, that Aldis's decisions have put Cody at physical risk by refusing to protect him from repeated attacks, and that Aldis's bias has damaged Cody's ability to perform his duties as WWE Champion by constantly putting him at a disadvantage in matches and segments. The complaint reportedly includes specific examples with dates and witnesses, documentation of conversations where Aldis dismissed Cody's concerns, and statements from other SmackDown wrestlers who have experienced similar favoritism shown to the Bloodline at their expense. WWE's response to this complaint has been predictably corporate and carefully worded, with a statement released to the wrestling media saying that they take all employee complaints seriously, that they're conducting a thorough review of the allegations, and that they're committed to maintaining a fair and professional work environment for everyone. Translation: they're in damage control mode, they're trying to figure out how to handle this without admitting wrongdoing, and they're probably scrambling to determine whether Nick Aldis acted on his own initiative or whether he was following directions from WWE's creative team when he made decisions that Cody is now challenging through official channels. If Aldis was following orders, then WWE has a much bigger problem because it means their entire creative process for SmackDown is built on unfair bias that's now being legally challenged. If Aldis was acting independently, then he's almost certainly going to be fired or removed from the general manager position because WWE can't afford to keep someone in that role who's generating formal complaints from their top champions. The wrestling community has been absolutely divided in their reactions to Cody's complaint against Nick Aldis, which tells you everything you need to know about how polarizing both characters have become. Cody's supporters argue that he's absolutely justified in filing this complaint, that anyone watching SmackDown with functioning eyes can see that Aldis has been protecting the Bloodline and punishing Cody for being their victim, that Cody tried to handle this through proper channels before going nuclear with an official complaint, and that WWE needs to take action against Aldis for failing to do his job competently and fairly. These fans point to the numerous examples of Aldis refusing to punish the Bloodline for clear violations while simultaneously putting Cody in disadvantageous positions, and they argue that any employee in any company would have grounds for complaint if their manager was treating them the way Aldis has been treating Cody. On the other side, there are fans who view Cody's complaint as evidence of backstage politicking, as Cody using his star power and his connections to Triple H to get his way when things aren't going how he wants them to go. These critics argue that Cody should be able to overcome obstacles without running to management, that part of being a top champion is dealing with authority figures who don't always support you, that filing legal complaints over wrestling storylines is taking things way too seriously and blurring lines between fiction and reality in ways that could damage the business. They suggest that Cody is being a poor sport about creative decisions he doesn't like and that he's setting a dangerous precedent where wrestlers can just file complaints whenever they're booked in ways they disagree with. But here's what that second group is missing, here's the crucial distinction they're failing to understand. If Nick Aldis's bias toward the Bloodline and against Cody Rhodes was purely a storyline, purely a creative decision designed to generate heat and build toward a satisfying payoff, then Cody wouldn't have grounds for complaint and he wouldn't risk his reputation by filing one. The fact that Cody went through official channels, involved legal representation and human resources, put his concerns in writing with specific allegations and documentation, suggests very strongly that what's happening on SmackDown goes beyond normal storyline friction and crosses into actual workplace issues about fairness, safety, and professional standards. WWE operates as a real company with real employees and real obligations to treat those employees fairly, and if a general manager, either real or kayfabe, is failing those obligations, employees have every right to use the formal complaint process to address those failures. There's also the question of what WWE's endgame is with this situation, assuming they even have an endgame planned rather than just making things up week to week. If this is all building toward Nick Aldis being revealed as corrupt or biased and facing consequences for his actions, then Cody's complaint accelerates that storyline and adds real-world stakes that make the eventual payoff more satisfying. But if WWE was planning to just continue having Aldis favor the bloodline indefinitely without any accountability or resolution, then Cody's complaint forces them to address the situation sooner than they might have wanted, potentially disrupting whatever long-term plans they had. Either way, Cody has fundamentally altered the trajectory of SmackDown's main storyline by refusing to accept the status quo and demanding answers from people above Nick Aldis who actually have the power to make changes. The impact this is having on the SmackDown locker room cannot be overstated, because Cody Rhodes is not the only person who's been frustrated with Nick Aldis' management style. He's just the first person with enough star power and job security to formally challenge it. Multiple wrestlers have reportedly told WWE officials during the investigation of Cody's complaint that they've experienced similar issues with Aldis showing favoritism to certain wrestlers while treating others unfairly, and that they didn't speak up previously because they feared retaliation or being labeled as troublemakers. Cody filing his complaint has opened the floodgates for other performers to share their experiences, and if even a fraction of what's being alleged is true, WWE has a serious problem with how SmackDown is being run and who's running it. Some of the most damning allegations that have emerged as part of this expanded investigation involve Aldis allegedly promising certain wrestlers opportunities and then failing to deliver on those promises without explanation, Aldis reportedly making decisions about who gets pushed based on personal relationships rather than merit or fan response, and Aldis supposedly ignoring safety concerns raised by wrestlers about dangerous spots or reckless opponents because addressing those concerns would complicate his booking plans. If WWE can substantiate any of these allegations beyond just Cody's specific complaints about the bloodline situation, Nick Aldis' time as SmackDown general manager is effectively over, because WWE cannot afford the legal exposure of keeping someone in a management position who's been credibly accused of creating an unsafe and unfair work environment. The timing of Cody's complaint is also significant because it comes right as WWE is in the middle of negotiations with potential media partners for their next round of television deals, and the last thing WWE needs during these sensitive business discussions is negative publicity about workplace complaints and biased management. Media companies are increasingly scrutinizing the workplace practices of their content partners, and wrestling companies in particular have faced extra scrutiny following various scandals and controversies over the years. WWE has worked hard to present themselves as a professional, well-run organization that takes employee concerns seriously, and a formal complaint from their top champion about their general manager creates exactly the kind of headline that could make media partners nervous or give them leverage to demand lower rights fees. Nick Aldis himself hasn't publicly commented on Cody's complaint beyond a brief statement posted to social media saying that he's confident any investigation will show he's performed his duties fairly and professionally, and that he looks forward to continuing to serve as SmackDown general manager once this situation is resolved. That statement is doing a lot of heavy lifting with the phrase, "once this situation is resolved," because it presumes that Aldis will survive this investigation with his position intact, which is far from guaranteed given the seriousness of the allegations and the number of wrestlers who are apparently backing up Cody's account of what's been happening. Aldis has allies within WWE, and he does have some because he wouldn't have gotten the general manager position without support from people in power, are reportedly working behind the scenes to defend him and to frame this as a misunderstanding or as creative decisions being misinterpreted as real bias, but their ability to protect Aldis depends entirely on what the investigation uncovers and whether WWE's leadership believes keeping him is worth the controversy. The bloodline has remained conspicuously quiet about Cody's complaint, which is interesting because normally Roman Reigns would be the first person to cut a promo mocking someone for running to management instead of handling their problems in the ring. The fact that neither Roman nor any other bloodline member has publicly addressed the situation suggests WWE has told them to stay silent while the investigation proceeds, probably to avoid saying anything that could complicate the legal aspects of the complaint or that could be used as evidence of the hostile environment Cody is alleging. Behind the scenes though, the bloodline is reportedly furious that Cody's complaint might derail storylines they've been building toward, and there's concern within that group that if WWE sides with Cody and removes or disciplines Aldis, it will fundamentally change the power dynamics on SmackDown in ways that disadvantage the bloodline moving forward. What's fascinating about this entire situation is how it exposes the inherent contradictions in WWE's model of having general managers who are supposed to be authority figures within the storyline but who are also real WWE employees subject to the same corporate policies and complaint procedures as everyone else. When those roles conflict, when a general manager's storyline actions cross the line into creating real workplace issues, WWE has to choose between protecting their creative vision and protecting their employees, and based on their history they'll almost always choose the latter because the legal and financial risks of ignoring legitimate workplace complaints are simply too high. So even if Nick Aldis's bias toward the bloodline was entirely a creative decision approved by WWE's writing team, Cody's complaint forces WWE to treat it as a real management issue that requires real investigation and potentially real consequences. Cody Rhodes filing this complaint demonstrates a level of backbone and willingness to challenge WWE's systems that we haven't seen from a top champion in years, and it raises questions about whether other wrestlers will follow his example when they have legitimate grievances about how they're being treated. For too long, WWE's locker room culture has been about keeping your head down, accepting whatever you're given creatively, not rocking the boat even when you have valid concerns, and hoping that if you're patient and compliant eventually you'll be rewarded. Cody is showing that there's another path, that wrestlers have rights and protections as employees that can be invoked when those rights are being violated, and that sometimes the only way to create change is to go through formal channels and force management to address problems they'd rather ignore. The question now is how WWE resolves this situation in a way that doesn't completely undermine either Cody Rhodes or Nick Aldis while also addressing the legitimate concerns that have been raised. Do they remove Aldis from the general manager position and replace him with someone new who can start with a clean slate? Do they keep Aldis but mandate changes to how he manages SmackDown and how he treats different wrestlers? Do they reveal this was all a work, all part of an elaborate storyline, though that seems increasingly unlikely given the formal nature of the complaint and the involvement of legal representation? Every option has consequences, every choice WWE makes will send messages about what they value and who they're willing to protect, and whatever decision they reach will probably satisfy some people while infuriating others. What we're witnessing is professional wrestling at its messiest and most complicated, where the lines between storyline and reality are so blurred that even the people involved probably aren't entirely sure where one ends and the other begins. Cody Rhodes filing a complaint to WWE officials against Nick Aldis for supporting the bloodline lately in WWE is either the most meta wrestling storyline in years or it's a genuine workplace dispute that's playing out partially in public, and the truth is probably some combination of both. Either way, it's absolutely riveting, it's generating massive conversation and engagement, and it's forcing everyone who watches WWE to think more critically about how the company operates behind the scenes and how much power wrestlers really have to control their own narratives and protect their own interests. Drop a comment right now telling me whose side you're on in this situation. Do you think Cody Rhodes is justified in filing this complaint, or is he overreacting to normal wrestling storylines? Do you believe Nick Aldis has been showing unfair bias toward the bloodline, or is he just doing his job as a heel authority figure? What consequences, if any, should Aldis face based on these allegations? Hit that subscribe button because this story is developing daily and WWE's decision on how to handle Cody's complaint will have massive implications for SmackDown and possibly for the entire company. Share this video with everyone who watches WWE because this is the most important backstage story of the year and it deserves serious discussion about workplace fairness, creative decisions, and the power dynamics between wrestlers and management in modern professional wrestling.